It is because of the world that we live in. It is because of the wickedness. It is because of the evil. And it is because of an increasing rise in violence, not just the Charlie Kirk situation, not just the Irina Zarutska situation, but situations around the country and around the world as a whole that I bring you this episode. Welcome to First Responder Fitness with Carl Wimmer, where armor is forged through mental, spiritual, and physical preparation. Welcome to First Responder Fitness with Carl Wimmer. I am your host, Carl Wimmer, and I thank you for joining me again for another episode this week. I thank you for joining me each and every week as we come together to try to just better ourselves, better the world around us, better our lives, work on our physical, mental, and spiritual fitness. And as you know, last week was an episode that was slightly outside of the usual topics for First Responder Fitness, and that is largely because of the murder of the Ukrainian refugee, Irina Zarutska. And I issued a rallying cry for men to prepare themselves, to stand up and prepare themselves mentally, physically, and spiritually to defend the innocent, to defend the weak, to defend the vulnerable. And that episode generated a lot of comments, a lot of feedback, and frankly, I want to do a follow-up episode. I think it's very timely because I just finished watching the Charlie Kirk memorial service, his funeral service, if you will. It was less like a funeral service and more of a celebration of life, a worship service, in fact, with some of the fantastic speakers, some who weren't so great, but most were just amazing. Worship music was fantastic, and the tribute to Charlie Kirk was amazing. I was especially touched by his bride, Erica, and her courage standing up there and commemorating her late husband. And it is because of the world that we live in. It is because of the wickedness. It is because of the evil. And it is because of an increasing rise in violence, not just the Charlie Kirk situation, not just the Irina Zarutska situation, but situations around the country and around the world as a whole that I bring you this episode. This episode is so important for your safety and your family's safety. This week's topic, I am going to take you through 5 ways to keep your family safe and to keep yourself safe in large public gatherings. In other words, stop being a soft target. But before we get into that, I would just like to encourage you to like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. We are growing and we have momentum, but again, most of our viewers are not subscribed. And so it takes 1 second if you would just click the subscribe button, click the bell button so you don't miss any content. Give us a thumbs up and share these videos. It goes a long ways in helping boost the algorithm and helps us keep bringing these episodes to you week after week. So, did you watch the Charlie Kirk memorial? It was streamed all over the world. People were tuning in. Millions and millions of people were exposed to who this good man was. They learned more about him, about his cause, and about the things that he believed. And the thing that really hit home to me, perhaps hardest, was the fact that Charlie Kirk was a devout husband and family man. And I so respect men who are just grounded family men. Men who get married, are willing to sacrifice for their family, willing to sacrifice for their wife, willing to sacrifice for their children so that they can keep the family unit together and thriving. But anytime you're out in public, anytime your family's out in public, anytime that anything like that is happening, as I watched the Charlie Kirk memorial, I could not imagine how much security and how much behind the scenes work had to take place to keep everybody safe. The amount of law enforcement, federal and state and local law enforcement that had to be on scene, the amount of security that had to be there to make sure that everybody was safe, it just astounds me at how much work they had to put in. And it, of course, made me think back to the situation at Utah Valley University, where Charlie Kirk was assassinated. And in my own mind, as a retired SWAT officer, someone who has done executive protection and has been involved in executive protection teams and assignments, it just made me reflect on the fact that if UVU, the university, and the law enforcement at the university had just done 1/1000th of what they did today, perhaps Charlie Kirk would still be with us today. And not to Monday morning quarterback this thing to death, because I'm sure it's going to happen. I'm sure there will probably be lawsuits, justifiably in my mind. And I believe that there will be terminations and job losses and perhaps going all the way up to the presidency of the university, because I did read where law enforcement has been asking for more officers and it has been denied repeatedly. I read a quote where the head of UVU told law enforcement, "We've never had active shooter here and we won't have one." The ignorance, the blind ignorance of that man, someone who I know, someone who I actually worked with superficially at one point in years past. I'm shocked at his blindness, that he would be so blind to evil, blind to the way the world works. But that blindness was horrifically and obviously shown, and he woke up real quick in the wake of the death of Charlie Kirk. And I hope that UVU, Utah Valley University, wakes up as well, because it is basic scene and perimeter security 101. You clear the rooftops. You secure the high ground. You secure rooftops. Rooftops were not secured, obviously. And that is a shame. That is embarrassing law enforcement work. That is embarrassing from the top down. So you contrast the two and you think, okay, well, what does the average person do? Because we go out into public all the time. We go to basketball games and football games. In fact, I'll be at a professional football game next week. And we see security at different levels. At the end of the day, men, you are in charge of your family's security. And women, if you're single mother, if you're the head of your household, you are in charge of your family security. This is not a man thing or a woman thing. This is all of us together. Because the fact is that evil people prey on the unaware. Ordinary people must stop being soft targets. We cannot allow ourselves to be soft targets. This ties back to the basics of first responder fitness, which is being physically prepared, mentally prepared, and spiritually prepared for this exact reality. That evil men prey on the unaware. They prey on the weak. They prey on the vulnerable. And you cannot allow yourselves or your family to be the weak, ordinary, the vulnerable. You've got to take steps to prevent that. So I want to talk to you about 5 things. I want to jump right into it. 5 things that you can do when you are in public to make sure that you are not a soft target. And we are going to start with perhaps the most important, and that is situational awareness. In other words, get off your phones. We need to get off our phones at all levels when we're driving in the car. When we are, if you're driving and texting or driving it on your phone at the same time, that is just dangerous. You're putting other people's lives at risk. And you're putting your future at risk because people are going to prison now when they hit and kill somebody when they're on their phone. But larger than that is the fact that you cannot be aware of your surroundings. You cannot have your head on a swivel. That's what we say in law enforcement, head on a swivel. Okay. Watching and taking in the scene if you are stuck with your phone in front of your face. You cannot do it. Now, I understand that maybe you're in a concert, maybe you're at a game and you want to do some recording. That's fine. But then put your phone away. I highly recommend that you go in any situation where you're in public, whether it be a restaurant, a concert, whatever the case may be, that before you pull your phone out, before you stick it in front of your face, that you assess the situation. You could even take the UVU situation, the Utah Valley University situation where Charlie Kirk was assassinated, and say, if you were there that day, would you have noticed the guy on the roof? Some people did, but they didn't say anything, which is another tragedy in and of itself. If you see something, you've got to say it. We'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute, but the fact is, most people never would have noticed. The sad reality is most people wouldn't have noticed if the shooter had set up in the middle of the crowd with them with a rifle over his shoulder or proned out on the grass behind them, because people are so distracted. Most people wouldn't even notice it. They wouldn't even be aware. That needs to stop. There was a study probably 30 or 40 years ago, long before cell phones even became a thing, where researchers went into prisons and they interviewed people who were in prison for rape and armed robbery, personal armed robbery, not bank robberies, that kind of thing, not robbing a store, but robbing individuals. So strong arm robbery or armed robbery of an individual. And they showed them videos of people, men and women, walking from their car to the parking lot, or walking from the car in the parking lot to the store. And they said, okay, based just on the way they're walking, based on their behavior, rank these people in order of victimhood. Who would you most likely try to rob? Who would you most likely try to rape? Put an order to them. It was shocking how the criminals ranked the people that were just on videotape so similarly. Those who were with their head down, those who were moping, and those who were obviously daydreaming as they walked from their car to the grocery store, those who were not paying attention, those who were not walking assertively, those who did not look fit, those who looked like victims. And you know who I'm talking about. You know what a victim looks like. And so does the criminal. Be aware of your surroundings. Scan the crowd without being paranoid. Take notes of the exits. That's basic, but when you go to the theater, they say, take notes of the exits before the movie starts. When you're in an airplane, the exits can be in the front or in the back, and they tell you to look around and look. You know what? Do that. Pay attention to where the exits are. Pay attention to where, what in law enforcement and SWAT, we'd call it an egress and regress area. Where are we going to run if we need to run? Where am I going to meet family if we need to meet family? If you're going to a fair and you're going to split up, kids are going to go here, you and the wife are going to go somewhere else, have a place where you will meet up outside of the fairgrounds in case something happens in the fairgrounds. Have a meeting place. Have a exit location and an exit strategy. It takes no time to do so, but if you need it, you're really going to wish you had done it. That brings me to and that really covers number 2, to be honest with you, because number 2 is know your escape routes. I've already covered that in situational awareness, but I just want to stress a couple different things in that. Know your escape routes. So you need to identify multiple exits the second you walk in anywhere. Know how you're getting out. Teach your family what I call the point and go drill, because If it's a really crowded, really loud venue, they're not going to hear you. So you need to teach them, if you point, they go. And if you're pointing towards this exit instead of the exit or entrance you came in, they need to know that. And they need to know what that means. So the few hand signals, just a few gestures, make sure your family is aware. So know your exits, know your escape routes, because, it used to be back in the day, school shootings and other mass shootings like that. They used to shelter in place. And many schools around the country still shelter in place. I'm generally opposed to shelter in place policies and shelter in place strategies because it has been proven time and time and time again that the best strategy is to run. It is to get away from wherever the shooter is. And the schools hate that because they want to be able to track the kids. They want to be able to know where the kids are. They don't want chaos. I tell you, I'd rather have chaos and collect the living kids later than not have chaos and just have fish in a fishbowl that are getting shot. Okay? So I always taught my kids, if there's an active shooter at the school, I don't care if your teacher says, you will get under the desk. No, you run. You run. And we see the FBI and the federal protocol is really changing. They now have the run, hide, fight protocol, a protocol that I strongly support in an active shooter situation. Run, get away from the sound of the bullets, get away from the bad guy as quickly as you can. If you can't, that's when you shelter in place. That's when you hide. And as a last resort, you fight. You fight to the death. You fight and you try to take the bad guy with you. You say, okay, look, if you're taking me, you're going with me. And you fight that hard. So, first one, situational awareness. Number 2, know your escape routes. Number 3, trust your instincts. God wired you with intuition for survival. All animals have it. I mean, maybe you don't have it anymore. You've lost it because of your cell phone. But it used to be that if you stared at somebody across the room, even if they weren't watching you, if they were just hanging out, reading a book or something, or they watching TV, there would be a sixth sense that something is off, and they'd look up and they'd see you staring at them. If you're walking, who has not been in a situation where you're walking down a hall in grade school, or you're walking down the sidewalk and you see someone walking toward you and you intuitively know that the person coming toward you is going to cause trouble? And so if you're smart, you cross the street. Or if you're smart, you go a different route to avoid trouble. But if you don't, then you oftentimes suffer the consequences of not listening to your intuition. Women oftentimes particularly have really good intuition, and I think that's fantastic. But the fact is you need to trust your instincts. If something feels off, don't ignore it. At the Charlie Kirk assassination, people saw a guy on the roof. Now, unquestionably, they probably thought it was a security guy, but they didn't know, and they assumed. Assuming will get you killed or get somebody else killed. If you see something that feels or seems off, say something. Do something. See, that's like the proverbial bump in the night. You're laying in bed and you hear a bump in the night. You hear something out in your living room, out in your kitchen. How many of you lay there and say, it's probably just a house settling. Oh, it's this, it's that. You justify it in your own mind, when in reality, you should just get out of bed and go make sure that somebody isn't breaking in your house. You don't want to get out of bed. You're either scared or you're sleepy and you want to go back to sleep. But no, you really need to not justify things. If something is off, check it out. You should always confirm your suspicions. Trust your instincts, confirm your suspicions. Very, very important. Number 4, strategic positioning. Anytime you go into a location, try to take the most strategic location you can. Anytime you go into a venue, a restaurant, a theater, for instance, I absolutely hate sitting with my back to a restaurant or to anything. I like to face my back to an exit. I like to face the exit. I like to see who's coming in and coming out. Now, I know that was confusing. I apologize. I hate to sit with my back to the door. Let's just put it that way. It makes me uncomfortable. That's more than 20 years of police work. I just hate to sit with my back to the door. But that is precipitated upon the fact that when I walk into the restaurant, I'm using that as an example, I have scanned the restaurant to see who's in there, because if I'm facing the door, it means everyone's behind me, and I need to know who's behind me. And so it's important that I scan the restaurant, make sure that, if there's somebody in there that I have arrested before, and that has happened more than once, where you're out in public with your family and the guy you just arrested last week is in the restaurant with you. You need to be aware. You need to take a tactical position. You should position yourself where you can see the exits, where you have a direct line to exits if possible. You should teach your kids where the exits are. Show them where the exits are, and make sure that you have a rallying point if you get separated. Now, if you are a concealed weapons permit holder, and if you are one of the men who has decided that you are going to fight for right and you're going to fight for the just, that is your decision. But I highly suggest that if a situation goes down, you get your family away from you first. Get your family away from you. Get your family safe. That is your top priority. Protecting your wife and children trumps everything else. So get them to safety. Then you can do what you need to do to engage the suspect, engage the bad guy, and hopefully save lives. But make sure that you take care of your kids, your family, and use strategic seating and positioning wherever you go. Number 5 is practice response scenarios. I would teach this to officers all the time when they were brand new, and I would teach them to play the what if game. I'd say, okay, look, we are on our way now to a domestic violence in progress. What if, when we pull up, one of the two of them is out in the street with a gun and they start shooting at us as we're pulling up to the house? What would we do? What if? What if we get there and it turns into a hostage situation? What do we do? You can do the same thing. Play the what if game. You're out at a restaurant. You don't have to tell your kids and scare your kids, but in your own mind, think, what if a guy came in and started robbing the place and going from table to table to table, robbing people sitting there? What if that happened? What would be your response? By playing the what if game, it is one of the most powerful things you can do. It is one of the most powerful tools you can do, because it brings your immediate freezing level down. What do I mean by that? In an emergency situation, people think, oh, you either have a fight or a flight type response. That is not completely true. You have a fight, a flight, or a freeze. And some people say that that's what happened to the men on the train when Irina Zarutska was murdered. They froze because in the face of such violence, they didn't flee and they didn't fight. They just froze. And that happens a lot. One of the ways you prevent yourself from freezing is play the what if game and watch and think through situations. What if you're in the theater and someone comes in and starts shooting? It happened at the Joker or Batman movie, about 10 years ago or so. What if there's a stampede? What if there's an active shooter and people start stampeding? What do you do? What if there's an active threat, shots fired? What if? Role play as a family. Even simple drills help remove panic. Now, you're not going to do that at the restaurant, but you could do it at home. You could even just talk about it. You could do a table talk role play. where you just talk about what could happen. My wife and I used to drill a fair amount, a lot more than we do now, but we would do this little drill, and we'd talk about also what we'd do if somebody broke in our house. And okay, of course, for us, we have a child who cannot get to us. We have a child who is paralyzed, a child who is has severe disabilities and is in a wheelchair. So we have to get to him. And so we would discuss what would we do to get all the family except for me into one room, so they're armed in the room with a phone, and I'm engaging the suspect. We would talk about these types of things, and it was kind of funny because we haven't role played in a long time in situations like that. And it wasn't that long ago, middle of the night, I'm dead asleep, and all of a sudden I hear my wife scream in a horrified voice, "Carl, there's somebody in our room." Well, I went from dead asleep to ready for combat in about an eighth of a second. My feet, I don't even remember getting out of bed. My feet were on the ground. I was going for my gun, and I was ready for war. And I was yelling for Alexa to turn on the lights. And during the chaos, my wife, she says, oh, it was just a dream. It was just a dream, a scary dream. And I was like, holy cow, that was horrifying. But even though it was a scary dream, I went and checked my entire house, armed, checked my house. And then it hit me. I got sick and I almost threw up in the toilet. And it's not because I know that this is a reaction I have. I've learned this over the years of being a law enforcement officer. If I have a massive adrenaline rush, all of a sudden the adrenaline hits hard, but I don't have an outlet. Like, I don't get to fight somebody. I don't get in a gunfight. I don't get to take someone to the ground. I'm not in a combat situation. And all of a sudden we go from way up here to down here. I get nauseous. The adrenaline needs to burn off and I get sick to my stomach. And that happened. I got to tell you, as scary as that situation was, I was so grateful it happened because it reaffirmed that I don't freeze, I fight. And my immediate unthinking reaction was fight. And that's what I trained it to be. And that's what it still is. You can train yourself to where your fight or flight response is a fight response. I'll never forget the time I was with a tour group in Israel, and we were having a great old time. But the elevator that took us up to our rooms, all of our rooms were on the same floor, only held a few people, so we'd go up a few at a time. Well, there's a man that was with us, a good guy. But he thought it'd be funny to scare me as I come off the elevator into a dark hallway. And as soon as the elevator doors opened, I walk off of the elevator and he jumps out at me. And I think I hit him. I hit him or kicked him and went into a combat stance and was going to attack him, but he tumbled back into the hall and I recognized him. And very quickly, the people on that tour trip learned you don't jump out at me. I have more stories I could talk about. The time I destroyed a Christmas tree one Christmas, it was midnight. I got in the shower at midnight. Why my wife decided to wrap the Christmas tree in plastic at midnight, she did. She brought the Christmas tree down. She took it down. It was after Christmas, wrapped it in plastic and set it right by the wall next to a door I'd have to walk through. I come out of the shower, come walking through the door, and there's a 6 foot, 7 foot figure to my right, looked like a person to me dressed in black, and I attacked and ended up destroying our Christmas tree. That may sound crazy to you, but the fact is you can train yourself to fight rather than freeze. And the way you do that is through practicing scenarios. Practice response scenarios in real life and in your mind. Think them through. Understand this. Bad guys choose soft targets because soft targets are easy. Bad guys are cowards. They're filthy, rotten cowards who want to prey on the vulnerable. You rarely see a guy go into a police station and try and shoot it up, because that person will die. He might take out one officer, but he's not taking out 30, unless you're the Terminator, Arnold Schwarzenegger. But you're not. So they like soft targets. They like weak targets. You need to make sure that you are a hard target. And how do you do that? Through physical training, building up your body, training how to fight, training how to use weapons, training how to use guns, preparing yourself in a well-rounded manner for self-defense. Mental conditioning, preparing yourself to fight or flee, depending on the situation, but never to freeze. Prepare yourself for the inevitability or the reality of a violent world, and prepare yourself to respond to it. Spiritually ground yourself. Prepare yourself and make peace with your God before violence happens. The police officers who survive mentally combat situations versus the police officers who spiral are oftentimes the difference is those who made peace with God before the gunfight happened. That's just the truth. I'm talking about being a sheepdog. Be a sheepdog for your family. The sheepdog roams around the perimeter of the sheep. The sheep are a little bit leery of the sheepdog, but the sheepdog would never turn his teeth on the sheep. His job is to protect the sheep. Having a sheepdog mindset does not mean that you need to live in fear. It just means you need to live prepared. Be prepared to protect your family. It goes along with 1 Corinthians 16. Be watchful, stand firm in the faith, act like men, and be strong. Again, God does not call you to be a passive doormat. He calls you to protect the innocent and protect your family and to resist evil. We need more good people who are willing to resist evil. In closing, I just want to say, you don't have to be law enforcement. You don't have to be military to keep your family safe. You just have to stop being passive, stop being distracted, and start living prepared. That's what you need to do. So that's that. I hope you enjoyed this. Rest in peace, Charlie Kirk. May that evil never happen again. We do honor you here at First Responder Fitness, and we, again, condemn the wickedness. But we do honor you, Charlie Kirk. We honor you, Erica Kirk. And we honor the sacrifice that Charlie paid for what he believed in. I encourage you again to subscribe, share this with somebody you love, and join me next week on First Responder Fitness. Until next time, I'm Carl Wimmer, encouraging you to be good to yourself, be good to others, and as always, stay safe.